Episode 13 opens on Caroline Cordovan walking through the boot, an Legion experimental research base, drinking coffee while giving orders to move supplies and crates to and fro. One of the soldiers fumbles a box, and winces as Cordovan approaches. Cordovan tells him not to fret, and in a voice laced with pride goes on a patriotic screed about the greatness of Atlas and how well it treats even those who are too inept to do their job properly. We will mold you until you are the perfect soldier, and nurture you until you can stand on your own 2 feet, for the sake of Atlas, if nothing else. But that will be coming out of your paycheck. The man slumps in defeat and walks off with the crate. Cordovan watches him sulk away with a proud smile when she's called on her scroll and takes a sip of her coffee as she answers it on speaker. One of her subordinates, D. Tweedle, says, "Ma'am, there is an incident at the front gate. There's a group of people requesting to talk to you." Cordovan shakes her head, drinking more coffee. "Who would come to the front gate unannounced?" D replies, "One of them claims he's a huntsman, ma'am." Cordovan rolls her eyes. "Well, tell him we're not the guild, we're the brave Atlas military." D continues, "I did, ma'am, with great honor and pride." Cordovan waits for him to continue, only to add herself, "And?" D finally says, "One of them claims she's a schnee." Cordovan breaks into a coughing fit. Swallowing as fast as she can, she chides him. "Why didn't you lead with that? I'll meet them in the first floor conference room, have them escorted there." D gives an affirmative and signs off. Cordovan strains her back and tightens her collar, smoothing out her uniform to seem more presentable. She walks off, muttering to herself, "What is that schnee vixen doing here? She just left. Did she talk with Ironwood? I passed the last audit with flying colors." Cordovan continues rambling to herself as she goes through several corridors, arriving finally at the conference room. After a quick pat-down, Cordovan folds her hands before herself and walks through the automatic door. With her eyes closed, she begins addressing, "Specialist Schnee, to what do I owe the..." She opens her eyes and sees Ruby Jr. Kern assembled in front of her, trailing off as she does. "Pleasure." Her face hardens and she yells, "D! Dudley!" Immediately, the 2 large officers form rank behind her, saying, "Ma'am." Cordovan looks at them and points to our heroes. "Who are these people?" Ruby steps forward, starting, "I'm..." Cordovan turns and snaps at her. "Did I ask you?" Looking back to her men, she snaps, "Answer me." Both hop on their feet and answer simultaneously. "Crow Branwen, Weiss Schnee, and guests, ma'am." Cordovan glares at them. "Crow... who? Branwen?" Crow steps forward now, holding up his scroll to her with proper identification, including an Legion seal on his license. "Look, Commander, I'm a friend of General Ironwood." Cordovan glares at him, asking, "How could a tribal be friends with General Ironwood?" She appraises the license and scoffs. "Could be a forgery. With Mistral and Vale incommunicado, things have been left to the wayside. There's no way to verify this. Every Mistrali guttersnipe carries forged at Legion documents." Cordovan sits. Weiss puts her hands down on the table and says, "Well, you can't fake being a schnee." Cordovan looks at her and says, "Oh, no. I recognize you. The runaway brat." Weiss pulls back and her face begins to heat. She quickly composes herself. "Be that as it may, I and my companions are seeking passage to Atlas. I would hope, with my family's good standing with the military, that could be easily arranged." Cordovan looks the crew over and says, "We're quite busy here, Miss Schnee. If you hadn't heard, Atlas is withdrawing to the homeland. Normally, passage would be quite a simple task, but unfortunately all our transportation is spoken for at current. In tandem with Atlas's borders being closed to civilians, I must regretfully inform you your request cannot be fulfilled." Ruby steps forward. Admiral?" Cordovan gives a look of disgust and shoots back, "Commander. Cordovan. I don't believe we've had the pleasure, Miss..." Ruby is briefly flummoxed, but continues. "Rose. Leader of Team RWBY. And we have an important message for General Ironwood." Cordovan feigns interest. "Oh dear, an important message? I find that quite ridiculous." Picking a piece of lint off her own uniform, she continues. "However, if you do have important information, I would be more than happy to pass it along for you in our next communique with Central Command." Crow speaks up. "Unfortunately, it's classified. Ironwood's ears only." Cordovan raises her brow. "What level?" Crow scoffs. "Well above yours." Cordovan is taken aback and scans him up and down. "I find that hard to believe." Crow crosses his arms and takes a more aggressive stance. Look, lady, if you won't take my credentials, then how am I supposed to prove that what I'm saying is true? She leans back and wrinkles her nose. You could come without smelling like a distillery, sir. Crow squares up, insulted. Maybe you'd like to stand on this table and say that to my face, ma'am. Cordovan, very measured, folds her hands and says, I have quite a busy schedule. D. Dudley, please show our colorful guests to the door. Cordovan stands and begins to walk to the door. Ruby rushes forward as best she can. Wait! Crow puts a hand on Ruby's shoulder and says, Come on, Ruby, this lady's not worth... Ruby shrugs off the hand and says definitively to Cordovan, We need to get to Atlas. This is life or death. Cordovan pauses on her way out of the door and turns to reassess Ruby. You are very adamant about this. Ruby replies, We walked all the way from Vale. We stopped a coup in Mistral just to protect this. Impulsively, Ruby pulls off the relic and places it on the table. Cordovan looks at it quizzically, while the whole group beside Ruby are clearly shocked and uncomfortable. Crow particularly jolts forward and says, Ruby, this isn't... Ruby cuts him off, only looking at him out of the corner of her eye. Your way wasn't working. We only have a few weeks before the borders close permanently. What other way do we have? Cordovan continues looking at the relic before glancing to Ruby and asking, What exactly is this? Ruby replies, That's the part we can't tell you. What we can tell you is that Atlas would want this protected. Ironwood would want this protected. And Professor Ozpin died to keep this secret. Cordovan straightens up, the weight of Ruby's words falling on her. Slowly, she says, I hope you realize I cannot verify anything you've just told me. Looking Ruby in the eye, she says, But I am poised to give you the benefit of the doubt. She takes a pointed look at Crow before continuing, And only you, Miss Rose. Taking a seat at the table and leaning on her elbows, she explains, There was no exaggeration about our transports to Atlas. We need every hand we can to ensure our pullout is smooth and successful. To that end, if you desire to get to Atlas, I would simply ask you assist in our withdrawal, and as compensation, I will personally guarantee your route to General Ironwood. Ruby perks and smiles, but it fades when Cordovan points to the relic. However, until such time, that object will be kept here under lock and key. The whole crew, again, starts with surprise, and John says, We can't do that. Ruby looks conflicted, but Cordovan offers, If this object is as valuable as you let on, then there is no place safer than here. The boot is an experimental research base. We have the tightest security Atlas can provide. Ruby bites her thumb, but says ultimately, and somewhat confidently, Fine, but I want the key. Cordovan leans back, reappraising Ruby. Very prudent of you, Miss Rose. I agree to your terms. Cordovan reaches out, and the two shake after a moment of hesitation for Ruby. Business done, Cordovan stands. Follow Quartermaster Tweedle and Quartermaster Tweedle to the lockup to secure your parcel. They will contact you tomorrow with your assignments. You can sort the tasks amongst yourself depending on capability. Shooting a glance to Blake, and then the rest of the crew with narrowed brows. I do hope your compatriots are up to the task, Miss Rose. A special thanks goes out to all of my wonderful patrons for supporting the channel. If you like this content and want more of it, please consider supporting it. Also consider picking up my new action-adventure novel, The Artificer, which is now available for purchase on Amazon in digital and in print. With that all said, back to your regularly scheduled fixing. We smash cut to the team outside the fortress as the main gate slams closed, with Ruby staring at the keycard in her hands. They all look a little lost as Blake asks, What just happened? And Yang responds, I think Ruby just got us enlisted? Ren corrects, Technically this would be conscription. Weiss rubs her brow. I literally went to a different continent just to avoid this. Ruby sighs and leans into her crutch. Well, at least we have a plan now. Looking to the crew and focusing on Junior, she says, Let's go back to the house. There's a lot we need to discuss. We cut to the inside of the Kata Arc household, looking at mounted wall clocks and framed pictures, one or two of which fall loose as the walls shake violently. We see John storming out the door, his fist shaking, while Roman is slouching against the wall, nursing a blackened eye. He yells after John, You punched the wrong guy, asshole! Crow chases after John, yelling, "Hey, kid, come back!" As Roman stands and slinks off to the bathroom, Neo in tow, we pan over the rest of the room. Ruby is watching despondently as John marches out the door. Ren and Nora are sitting on the couch and holding each other's hands for support. "But I thought Oz had a plan." There is silence as the people in the room process the words. After a while, Ruby shakes her head, saying, "There has to be a way. There has to be." Blake says, "There have been humans for thousands of years. Ozpin's been around since the beginning. If there was a way to stop her..." Yang breaks in. "But he wasn't trying to stop her. This whole time he was trying to keep her alive. We know what can kill her. Get the relics together." Blake replies, "You want to risk Judgment Day?" Ruby counters, "We don't know if it'll be Judgment Day. It was kind of vague on the whole thing." Ren counters, "Ruby, what does it mean for humanity to be more than mindless shadows? The world could die. Bringing those relics together sounds questionable at best." Ruby, exasperated, asks, "So should we just give up?" Nora surprises everyone by saying dejectedly, Maybe we should just give up. What can we do?" Ruby retorts, "Something, anything. We can't just let her destroy the world." Ren asks, very measured, "But what if we destroy the world in the process? Do we even have the right to risk that?" Yang leans forward and replies, "Oz and Salem were literally playing God. We haven't had the chance to do anything. If we don't take this risk, we'll be stuck in this goddamn cycle forever." Weiss just mutters to herself, "I'm still just reeling over there being actual gods. I'm not the only one, right?" She looks to the crew, and Ren is the only one to raise his hand. Ruby growls in frustration and says, "We're getting nowhere." Roman walks up to the group, brushing off his shirt. "I agree. I think you're all being petulant about this." He winces as he touches his black eye. Ruby looks back to her friends and says, We need to focus on what we know." With a look of concentration, Ruby begins to list facts. "We know that Salem's immortal, and we know that Ozpin didn't plan to kill her." Yang tacks on, "He wasn't even trying to stop her." Ruby glares at her sister. "Yang, stop." Yang crosses her arms, but stays silent. Weiss picks up, saying, "There are 4 relics, and if they're brought together, the gods will show up and the world will be redeemed? What does that even mean?" Ruby shakes her head and says, "I don't want to linger on what ifs." Blake says, "That's all Jin gave us to go on." Nora asks, "Couldn't we just ask her about something else?" Ren asks in return, "Will that be worth anything? How do we know we can trust the relic? How true is any of this? All of it could be an illusion." Roman is thoughtful for a moment and then points to Ren. "This kid is asking the right questions. How can we trust it?" He turns to the group, waving his arms emphatically. "From what I can tell, the old man's been stringing people along for centuries, longer possibly. He's had all this time to set up all this convoluted bullshit to trick people into doing what he wants. Gods, immortals, maidens, grim magnets, I don't care. I only came along to get the old man to shut up. And newsflash, I haven't heard a damn thing from him since all this got outed. I don't know what reasons you all have to stick around, but I am struggling to find one for myself. I'm done." Roman turns around and walks to the door, sparing Neo a glance. She briefly looks to Yang and shoots her a conflicted look before following after. Yang sighs as Neo leaves the room, and the room goes quiet as the front door closes. There is silence for a time. Ren, ruminating on that last line, looks to Ruby and says, "You know, John was talking to me and Nora last night. He mentioned that we could stay here, get our licenses, stay in Argus." Ruby looks up at him, floored. "But we walked across Mistral together." Blake's ears twitch at that. Nora replies, "Yeah, but we can help people here." Ren squeezes her hand and adds, "That's all we ever wanted. To help." Yang gives a scoff of disdain at the whole situation, standing and walking out to the back patio. Blake looks to the remaining people before following Yang. Ruby's face is despondent, and she sweats in silence over the whole conversation. Weiss looks at the deteriorating group and Ruby's deteriorating mental state, resting a hand on Ruby's shoulder. Talking generally to the room, she suggests, "I think we all need to get some fresh air." She helps Ruby stand and leads her to the door. They leave, and shortly afterward, Ren and Nora go upstairs, leaving the room empty. We linger on the room in silence, and it fades in on a similar camera shot overlooking an equally silent forest floor covered in melting snow. Grim paw prints can be seen in the slush, and we hear the crunchy squelch of footfalls gradually getting louder as Carden, Skye, and Dove come into view. Carden leads while Dove closely monitors his scroll. We learn why when Skye asks if Dove has picked anything up. Dove replies, annoyed, "Skye, it hasn't even been an hour. If his transponder pops up, I'll tell you." Skye shakes his head, nodding to the setting sun. "Sun's going down. If we don't hear something soon, we should think about setting up camp." Carden stops and shields his eyes from the sunlight, his face conflicted. "It's been 3 days. If we stop now..." He reaffirms himself, his face hardening. "We don't stop. Not until we find him." The other two look at him solemnly, and Skye says, "Come on, these Urza tracks are still pretty fresh. They're being drawn to something." The group carry on in silence, and we get a crossfade to some time later as they're all beginning to huddle together for warmth. The wind is beginning to pick up along with light flurries. In the distance, a new set of footfalls can be heard, and the three freeze, looking into the growing darkness in front of them. Moments later, a lone wolf bursts out of the brush, rushing past them and into the woods beyond. The three watch in confusion, only to hear a pained wolf howl ahead of them. The trio spread out into a cautious, tactical formation, drawing their weapons. They brace themselves against a smattering of trees and peer around, to see Adam, having just cleaved through another wolf, flicking the blood off his blade into the snow and sheathing it. At his feet are a slaughtered pack of wolves, their blood still steaming into the cold night air. The three boys fly behind their respective trees and try to silently communicate with each other about what to do. All are clearly panicked, and it's only exacerbated when they hear Adam begin to walk. Carden steels himself and grips his weapon, lifting it to a ready position, but he falls short of rounding the tree to attack Adam. Instead, Carden lowers his mace and holds still. We see both Adam and Carden in shot as Adam pauses, unmoving in the rising moonlight, before walking onward stoically, his gait uneven but undeterred. Once he's out of sight, Carden, Dove, and Skye all visibly relax, letting out deep breaths of relief. Immediately, Carden looks to Dove and orders him to call Argus, only for Skye to interrupt and hold up his own scroll, saying that he's been trying to for the last minute. They're clearly out of range. Carden scowls and looks to the blood trail in Adam's wake. Dove asks, "What are we going to do?" Carden responds, eyes sunken but hardened, "We keep going." He turns, and the two only hesitate a second before following in step. The camera lingers on the bloody trail leading into the woods, before cutting to black.